Call the meeting to order. I want to thank everyone for being here today. It's a very important subject. As you know, we have legalized adult use marijuana cannabis, but we have not yet created the apparatus for which to sell it. We're still working on that. And this conversation, as you all know, cannabis, according to the legislation that we have in place now that still has to be reenacted, the proposed date for legalization of adult use sales is January 1, 2024. And so the purpose of this meeting is to have a conversation about and gather information on whether it's feasible to move that date up. There's been a great deal of conversation in a lot of communities that we've legalized it, but we haven't created a way for folks to legally purchase it. And then so that we've created an apparatus for folks to legally possess, but not legally purchase. And so one of the things that we want to do is have a conversation with those who are invested in the community and in the industry experts that are already selling either medical marijuana, the pharmaceutical processors, and/or those hemp processors who are already selling other products, cannabis-related products, but not necessarily selling what we would consider the THC level for legal cannabis. So we wanted to have a conversation today just to talk about that. You see our agenda that was published, and I guess wanted to start it off with any comments from any members of the committee. There was any conversation or any questions about that. But prior to that, I guess, Madam Clerk, we have to call the roll.
Senator McPike.
Here.
Delegate Adams. Delegate Krizak. Delegate Moorfield.
Here.
Senator Eben.
Here.
Delegate Scott.
Present.
You have a quorum.
That's all it takes. Thank you. So with that, I guess I'll ask the chair of the overall commission to begin with any comments. Senator Eben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's important, just to be clear for the public, as you stated, that there are no penalties right now for possessing small amounts of cannabis, adults 21 and older, and that we do have people selling cannabis in Virginia, just not legally. There's a group called New Frontier Data that issues a U.S. cannabis report that estimates the Virginia illicit market at $1.8 billion a year of cannabis sales, the fourth largest illicit market in the nation. I don't know how they go about those estimates, but I'm sure it's fair to say that it's significant. So to me, the question is not whether we're going to move forward with adult use sales, but whether we're going to have a product that's tested and one that we have a strict age limit and reduce the illicit market. And I think that's why we're here, and I appreciate the discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Moorfield, any comments?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
He's saving his comments for when he takes over the chairmanship of this subcommittee. There was an election last week, so he's just keeping his powder dry. Senator McPike?
No, Mr. Chairman. Look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. The first thing I wanted to do is kind of set the parameters for the conversation around, like, what steps do we need to take to allow for an earlier sale date? And what does that look like? And I know that there are some folks here who may have some comments, and I just wanted to, in the agenda, I already have a space for a lot of folks to speak, but I kind of wanted to talk to some folks earlier if they were here, and I do see them here. And I wanted to ask Alexander McCauley to come up. I know he does a lot of work with the pharmaceutical processors, and I just kind of wanted to get his take on what do you think are some steps, because at the end of the day, some of these folks are already doing. I know there's some folks that don't want to hear from industry, but you're going to have to hear from industry. They're already doing it, and we just kind of want to get their viewpoint and position as we move forward. And I just want to thank you for being here. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alexander McCauley. I'm an attorney for Jushi, which is has the medical cannabis license in Northern Virginia. They operate under the name of Beyond Hello. And just to follow up on Chairman Evans' remarks, and I think this was reported recently in the Times-Dispatch, that the illicit cannabis market is driven by online sales, dark web kind of stuff, and then your garden variety drug dealers. But the problem is, and Chesterfield Sheriff made this point, is that there's no such thing as a cannabis-only drug dealer. They also sell heroin, they sell methamphetamine, they sell fentanyl, cocaine, and so you've got Virginians who can legally possess the cannabis, but they're going to these dealers who have every incentive to try to upsell them to these hard drugs, which are very dangerous. So I applaud the subcommittee for trying to grapple with how do we get there sooner to a legal market, a product that is medical grade, that is safe, and consumers know what they're getting. So I think the industry's proposal would be to have the Cannabis Control Authority issue temporary permits on July 1 of this year to the pharmaceutical processors, and that they would make their medical products available to adult use consumers. The same regulations, it would be the same product, it would be the same regulations that we currently operate under in terms of testing, which is very strict and rigorous regulations. It would be the same requirements in terms of labeling, same quantity limits. Our view is essentially that you could start the adult use market if it was the will of the General Assembly on July 1, and the industry is ready, and we think we can meet a good part of the demand. There's been a lot of conversation about social equity, and there should be a lot of conversation about that. We have a lot of ideas as to how that's done, how that has worked in some states and has totally failed in others. But we don't really feel like we don't feel like we're quite qualified to say what that program should look like. We obviously want to share our thoughts of what's worked and what hasn't worked, and we are kind of at your disposal in terms of helping that move along. One point we would make is that the taxes on adult use sales, in the bill that passed last year that has to be reenacted, it was 21% sales tax, and we think that could be collected by us on our adult use sales, and that money could be put forward to social equity licensees or to micro businesses. A concept which we really like is the opportunity zone idea, kind of picking up on the Delegate Moorfield and Delegate Aird's legislation from, I believe it was 2019, where there were certain tax incentives that were in place to try to drive job creation to some of our most economically disadvantaged rural and urban areas, and we think that was a very good model, and that's something that y'all could look at. I don't think I have really any other things specifically to say about how to do this, other than just to emphasize that the Board of Pharmacy would, in this transition period, would continue in its role over us to make sure that we're complying with the regulations. And I think we would also think you should have requirements about, we have to maintain a sufficient inventory for the medical patients, and probably have separate cash registers or a separate window for the medical patients. So if with your permission, I did want to ask Jen Michelle Padini from Normal to come forward, because I think she can give more of a national perspective on how this has happened in other states.
Mr. Chairman?
Well, obviously, to any questions, I'm
Right,
sorry.
before you go, we have.
Yeah, because one question was provoked in my mind. In the pharmaceutical program now, is there a THC limit per dose or use that's prescribed at, I think it might be 10 milligrams, is that right?
Yeah, there is a limit, and that might need to be. I mean, it's certainly something we've been in conversation with the Board of Pharmacy about whether that limit is appropriate right now. But in what we're suggesting to you today, unless y'all change that by statute, that would stay the same.
Sure, but I think that we made a 5 milligram use limit for the for adult use. Is that correct?
I don't.
I just wanted to point out that there's that there might be some adjustment required if the pharmaceutical processors were to be selling to those two different audiences under the same under the bill the way it was written last year.
Yes, but I think, Mr. Chairman, if I may, it's very important, we think, for this to go smoothly, for the products to be exactly the same.
Okay.
That's because once we get into different types of products, then you got to get into rulemaking, and that would slow things down. So that is why our suggestion is to have the same products. I mean, there's some formulations that obviously wouldn't be appropriate for an adult use, like a nasal spray or something like that. But
Let me ask a question to our attorney, Mr. May. Is that what's the data? What's the legislation say regarding the levels, THC levels?
Mr. Chair, for the adult use recreational marijuana, it would be 5 milligrams per serving, and I think a total limit of 50 milligrams per container of THC, whereas the medical would be 10 milligrams per serving with a total limit per container of 100 milligrams.
And so currently the pharmaceutical processors are at the 10 milligram, 100, and the legislation for adult use is half that, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions provoked by Mr. McCauley's statement? All right. Thank you, Mr. McCauley. And Ms. Pandini, you can come forward.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Jen Michelle Padini. I'm a director with the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Senator Eben made some really important points about Virginia having the fourth largest illicit cannabis market in the nation. And it, in 2020 alone, was valued at $1.8 billion. Wouldn't be surprised to see those numbers increase in 2021, given that we are in this depenalization phase where we have enacted some really important principles for legalization by eliminating criminal penalties, allowing for personal cultivation, and sealing of records. But then we have the other half of the really critical policy points of legalization, which is regulation, and that's what provides for public and consumer safety. Also, as you mentioned, the question is not about legalization, we've enacted that, but the question is, how long do we want to maintain this in-between phase where it really disadvantages consumers and creates additional opportunity for illicit market activities. Consumers have been very vocal to NORML. NORML represents specifically consumers in the policy debate. We are not an industry organization. I have no doubt you will hear even more from your constituents in the coming weeks about this issue. They are frustrated that we have operational dispensaries in the state, but unless they are participating in the medical program, they cannot shop there. It is very much a standard policy practice in the United States when a state expands from medical to adult use to expedite sales to their already existing operators because it helps accomplish those policy goals of providing for consumer safety. This is certainly a step we hope the Commonwealth is willing to embrace and expedite in the 2022 session. I also would like to comment on the 5 milligram, 50 milligram, 10 milligram, 100 milligram disparity that we have right now. It would absolutely be appropriate to move adult use into the 10 milligram per serving, 100 milligram per package. This is very common throughout the United States. There are some states that have the lower threshold that we've currently adopted, but it would keep all the products on par between medical and adult use and alleviate that regulatory burden.
Question. You talked about a lot of issues. I want to get back to start date.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what your thoughts are on how that happens. You heard Mr. McCauley's comments. I'm very concerned that the intent, at least of the legislation, was to make sure that we provided for some social equity, and I'm very concerned that we may begin that and leave it up to those who get to begin early to kind of implement their own plan. And I just want to make sure that we have any legislative ideas to make sure I have some to make sure that we hold folks accountable to maintain the spirit of what we thought about impacting those who had been incarcerated or have a criminal history or record based on the fact that they were selling or possessing marijuana. I'm very concerned. I'm not hearing that connection between the early start date and making sure that we still have those folks participating. And so what are your thoughts on how we do that in light of the comments that Mr. McCauley said that we could begin as early as July 1 if we license those processors and allow them to begin selling? How do we make sure that those folks still get to participate?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of serious legislative debate about that social equity component in particular and what that looks like going forward, how that is maintained. While ensuring that damages done by prohibition are addressed, are remediated, is certainly something Normal cares deeply about. Our perspective on this is largely focused on consumers. And so certainly through a temporary license, processors could begin sales potentially as early as July 1, 2022. But it would seem that if we were able to expedite licensing through the CCA for new businesses, the earliest that could realistically happen, the issuance of those new licenses would be January 1, 23. Based on the enactment of July 1, 2022. And then hopefully we could see some businesses ready within, that 6-month window to begin sales, likely not for fully fleshed out cannabis products, but maybe in the seeds and clones area as well. I don't know what the solution is to maintaining social equity provisions. I think that's going to be a really difficult policy discussion, and I hope that we are able to look at some of the ways we already attempt to accomplish this in the Commonwealth, perhaps through the SWAM policies that are already in place.
What about requiring the pharmaceutical processor and the hemp growers who may also be coming in early? I'm hopeful that they'll have something to say about this as well. What about funding those loan programs, low interest grant, requiring them to have dispensaries for folks? I mean, there are a lot of ways that we can accomplish that at the same time that we issue those licenses. And to begin July 1, I'd love to hear, if not from you, some others that are in this space, advocacy space, about how we make sure that we ensure some fairness around it. Otherwise, I just think it's going to be difficult to move forward, and I think we may have to take a step backwards in Virginia. I'd be fearful that we'd have to take a step backwards if we didn't get those people who really fought to make sure that this legislation got passed in the first place. I'd hate to see this whole thing collapse because we didn't take care of those folks who had been most harmed by past prohibition.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that gentle reminder. There will be fees associated with licensing, particularly with early licensing, and it seems that those monies might be appropriate to dedicate to the Cannabis Equity Reinvestment Fund.
Yeah, my concern is that those folks who have put everything on the line fighting for this issue, it looks like a bait and switch. They passed it, they fought like heck to get it done, and then when the time comes to pay the piper, they get left out in the cold. And I'd like to hear some specifics about how those folks don't get left out in the cold as we move forward in these discussions.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks. Any other questions prompted by the committee or based on the
Just
testimony?
a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
I think one option to help assist that the social equity component move forward, if we do allow the pharmaceutical people to have early sales, would be to develop an incubation program for micro cannabis businesses, meaning that these potential micro businesses could apply through a procurement type process to be selected and participate with the pharmaceutical people, gaining experience in things like licensing, pricing, regulatory compliance, leasing, taxes, finance, loan and grant applications, et cetera, and other aspects of running that business, and not allow the pharmaceutical or hemp or whoever move forward unless they're incubating other businesses that could be eligible for a equity license.
Thank you, Mr. Morville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a two-part question. Earlier, you had mentioned the illicit market. Are you seeing a correlation between the home grow provisions that we've already adopted and maybe the illicit market, and two, by having a more structured, regulated, commercialized structure, obviously, in your opinion, do you see that reducing the size of the illicit market?
So to the second point, yes, absolutely. And we've seen that happen across the U.S. Legalization is not a solution for illicit activity, but it does reduce illicit market transactions. You are, not that I know if you buy cigarettes or not, but if you were to buy cigarettes, you wouldn't be buying them loose in the parking lot behind CVS. You might go into a place that sells them where it's lit and regulated, and what's on the package, what's on the labels, what's in the package. And so we know that consumers are looking for that convenience, for that safety, for that affordability when it comes to these transactions. So we do know that illicit market activity goes down, but it does not eliminate it. Some things that make it worse are when we price consumers out of the marketplace. This is something that medical patients are struggling with right now, where they can't afford to access the program. So they continue to engage in illicit activity. So that's something to be mindful of. Certainly, affordability is key to reducing activity. Sorry, what was your first question?
Do you see a correlation between home grow and the illicit market?
So no, and I spoke to someone earlier about this. There's this idea that Virginians in this $1.8 billion industry are getting that from their friend who just grows some cannabis in their garage. It's not. This is a huge industry. It's largely controlled by organized crime.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator McPike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thinking through sort of the sequence that we went through in the testimony during our regular session, I know one of the points that came up was the safety awareness campaign. And so in sequence, what I'm trying to figure out in my mind is if there was an accelerated start date to the medical side, how and under what budget, under what authority would we be able to ramp up? Because theoretically, that would have to happen by January 1, I think, keeping with our original timeframe. And so while accelerating, I think, not only to the point of the social equity program, but also to the safety awareness campaign, frankly, I would be concerned that we would get folks potentially crossed up with transporting in vehicle versus in trunk and other sort of nuances that I don't think people are quite aware of. I am in favor of exploring the idea. I'm also cautious that we don't skip the steps that I think we really put a lot of time in laying out a sequence of events to make sure that from a consumer safety standpoint, from a public safety standpoint, we had certain elements in place in advance of sort of adult purchase opportunities. And so I think as we have this discussion, we need to make sure we circle back to some of the timeline and sequence that we've thought out as we're deliberating this bill. I'm just interested in seeing if you got any ideas on how to solve it. I don't know the solutions. I just want to make sure that we spend time to sort of go back and take a look through the sequence that we sort of anticipated.
So fortunately, Virginia is not anywhere close to the front of the pack when it comes to regulating cannabis for either medical or adult use, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I did provide to Delegate Mullen during this debate earlier in session some great resources on this. Colorado has a wonderful website that is broken out to target specific demographics. So it has information both online and in printable format and for educators for children in different age groups and then for adults. So it's a great website, certainly something we could look at, and I believe there was money in the budget Senator Evan allocated to public awareness campaign.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Delegate Morfield.
Just one more question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that we all get wrapped up in our own lives, and especially us as policymakers and Virginia-related issues, but I'm just curious, and can you give us an update on the national conversation, where things are?
A number of states passed adult use legalization measures this year, enacted them along with Virginia this year. While there is federal legislation pending, we are still many years away from that succeeding in Congress. And so it really is incumbent upon states to enact their own regulatory measures to manage cannabis in their state. Something that we discussed during session was that if Virginia were to not do so prior to the end of federal prohibition, then we would be more likely to be subject to whatever the proposed federal regulations might be, as opposed to having that choice as a Commonwealth, what we think is best for Virginia. Fortunately, we appear to be on the right path in that regard. We are in Altria's backyard. We're just renting space here, and that's likely going to be who foots the bill along with some other major brands to end federal prohibition. I think that when we think about what big cannabis means, that's big. We have some multi-state operators here in Virginia. They are not big in comparison to Altria or Constellation. I think it helps to keep that perspective. I think it's also important to remember that while discussions about who makes money first or next on cannabis are important, but we didn't legalize cannabis for people to make money. We legalized it to end the failed policy of prohibition. That's a policy that impacts consumers. Thank you.
I appreciate your opinion, but before you go, hold on.
Always got
Senator
me.
McPike.
Not off the hook that fast.
All right, I'm here for you.
So the suggestion of sort of raising the milligram threshold from 5 to 10, one of our discussions at the full committee of oversight was the unresolved quantities of Delta 8, right? So we have sort of a pending question that's not yet defined. There seemed to be some level of caution amongst the full committee about how to resolve that, and the suggestion that there sort of be a separate bill that addresses it, but at the same time, if one were to suggest raising from 5 to 10 without that resolution, there may be causing some conflict in the future in terms of where that shakes out. And I'm not sure what the issue, I'm just sort of providing a flag of some potential crossfire amongst the Oversight Commission as well as maybe some other members where we have a sort of a moving target on this that I don't think we have enough data on to make a decision around.
I think we can be specific in when we're quantifying tetrahydrocannabinol that is allowed in a product by saying it is Delta 9. While Delta 8 does occur naturally in the plant, it's in very, very minute amounts. And so what we're seeing, these Delta 8 products, that is not naturally occurring Delta 8. It is cannabidiol that has been gone through a synthesization process to create this isomer of Delta 8. It's not a naturally occurring version of Delta 8. So we could certainly be specific in the language when it comes to labeling products and what the allowed content is. What we aren't seeing in states that regulate legal cannabis products, we aren't seeing a plethora of Delta 8 products on the shelves in state licensed dispensaries. Could they be there? Sure, but they ought to be labeled clearly to indicate that it contains a synthetic cannabinoid. criminalizing Delta 8 is not the answer. That's a step backward. But, if for some reason someone wants to consume that, then it ought to be regulated and labeled accordingly.
Just one follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. So I understand that. I mean, it's my understanding that some of Virginia soils actually do well at producing Delta 8 naturally. And so I think there are a number of different questions that we still have to struggle with to understand the impacts to obviously, future adult use and sort of the appropriate labeling and control and understanding of it. Understanding that right now some foreign markets also control and do TCHS and Delta 8 as a combined total sort of rating. We don't have that right now. In Virginia, very little states have really addressed that. And so this is sort of an emerging issue that I think is not yet defined that we need to understand better before we suggest, I think, at least my position would be before we suggest increasing limits for adult use beyond what we contemplated, that we know a little bit more about what is the right answer on that. And so we've got a month and a half or a month or whatever the time warp is now between now and January. I'm not sure we're going to have those answers, but I'm certainly interested in exploring those. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. So you're saying that people are manipulating the Delta 8 to make money? Is that what I heard?
What?
But
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm clear that this is about some money, because I kind of heard you talking about something else for a minute. I just want to make sure we come back. At the end of the day, this is economics.
It is about making a buck on the backs of consumers quickly.
This is America. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I wanted to ask Mr. Bishop, who also has some interest in working with some farmers, hemp growers, processors, warehouse guys.
Sure.
What your thought was. Well, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dylan Bishop. I'm here on behalf of the Cannabis Business Association of Virginia. Appreciate the opportunity to offer some comment. As to the expediting of legal adult use sales, we admit that our pharmaceutical processors are ideally suited to help the Commonwealth expedite that. They have a top-notch product that's manufactured and grown in extremely regulated environment, and it's a medical-grade product. But admittedly, the adult use market is exponentially larger than our pharmaceutical market, and if we are to expedite this process, they may need some help in terms of supply chain. We do have a large network of sophisticated hemp processors here in the Commonwealth. Admittedly, hemp processors exist in every corner of the Commonwealth with varying degrees of sophistication. What Cannabis VA would posit is that there are a certain number of top-notch upper echelon hemp processors that would be in a position to help facilitate this expedited adult use sale. Now, that line of demarcation, we have to put it somewhere. They likely will not meet the... All right.
This is not a drill, I've been told. Let's go.
I think we're moving on to the next one. Was that right?
See, Dylan, remember that. Remember that. You want to go ahead and resume where you were talking?
We're ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, Mr. Chairman, I'll recap just for 1 second. My name is Dylan Bishop. I represent the Cannabis Business Association of Virginia. And point blank, we are wholly in support of expediting the legal sales for adult use cannabis in the common by whatever means. But back to my earlier remarks, certainly the pharmaceutical processes are aptly and ideally suited to help with that process. But the adult use market, we reasonably anticipate. I mean, it's good manufacturing practices. These are FDA standards that assure the identity, strength, quality, and purity of a consumable product by requiring that manufacturers adequately control manufacturing operations. What we would posit is that the hemp processors that are GMP certified would be in a position to assist in the commercial cultivation and sale of marijuana products, cannabis products for adult use. Under the assumption that they would meet the same testing, labeling, and dosage requirements currently stipulated in the adult use legislation. And particularly so with, like I said, with the seeds and the clones as well. These folks have the infrastructure and the expertise in growing cannabis. They just happen to specialize in growing cannabis with a lower THC concentration. As to the Delta 8 question that you had posed earlier, Senator McPike, Mr. Chairman, if I might, it's our position that Delta 8 is a hemp-derived substance regulated under the 2018 Federal Farm Bill and under the current hemp regulations that have been passed by VDACs. Now, we do recognize that Delta 8 THC does have some psychotropic effects, and consumers should be made aware of that. So I would agree with the remarks of Jim Michelle Patini wholeheartedly. And Cannabis VA plans on working with Delegate Don Adams, among others, and bringing forth legislation in the 2022 General Assembly session to regulate Delta 8 THC and those products. We think that they should be appropriately labeled as, this product, this hemp-derived product may cause psychotropic effects. Please do not operate heavy machinery. Please keep out of reach of children. Right now, it's only hemp products intended for smoking that are age restricted at 21 and over. We would also suggest in this proposed legislation that all Delta 8 products require, whether or not they are required, or intended for smoking or not, should be 21 and over. So I'd be willing, and Cannabis VA would be willing to work with our colleagues in the room, as well as any legislators that have an interest in providing reasonable regulations around Delta 8 products. And I'll close with one more point of accord with Jim Michelle Patini's remarks. Criminalizing the sale of Delta 8 products or the production of Delta 8 products is not the answer. We need to provide reasonable regulations. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks on behalf of Cannabis VA, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I think Senator Eben has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to drill down a little bit on the line of demarcation of qualifying hemp growers for participating in cannabis, in full-blown cannabis. Yes. You mentioned GMP certified. Do you know how many of the existing hemp growers, maybe you could tell us if you know how many hemp growers there are in the state and how many of them might be GMP certified?
Well, VDACs would be in a better position to answer the question of how many folks are licensed or, registered to process hemp in the Commonwealth. I can only say that I know of at least 2 hemp processors in the Commonwealth that are GMP certified or capable of being GMP certified. But then again, I don't know every single hemp processor in the Commonwealth. But there's at least a handful that would be in a position to help the pharmaceutical processors in getting these products into adult hands through illegal means.
Okay, because, Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up.
Yes, sir, Senator.
My concern is that if we allow the hemp growers to participate early, that we don't want just anyone to sign up as a hemp grower, which is a relatively not a high threshold, and then all of a sudden just convert to full-blown cannabis. And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if anyone from VDAX might be here today in the room. I don't think there is, as far as I know.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, if I might,
Yes, go ahead.
that's why, admittedly, we do have hemp processors with varying degrees of sophistication. That's why Cannabis VA suggests that, we only permit the hemp processors that can prove that they're GMP certified, which again are FDA standards, to participate in this program. Now, I'm remiss in not mentioning in my earlier remarks that, we would suggest that it would almost mirror the pharmaceutical processor model, and that these big hemp processing facilities would also be permitted to have a handful of satellite facilities for the retail sale of these products. I would also make the suggestion that for these commercial enterprises that step up to help fill this void, that they be given deference in the licensing process once we become fully regulated and reenacted and those come into effect.
Delegate Moorfield.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you explain to the committee what hemp farmers experienced over the last, or what they have experienced over the last couple of years?
Sure. A number of hemp farmers are, in fact, I would go to say a significant portion of hemp farmers hail from rural Virginia, many of whom, particularly in Southside Virginia, are former tobacco farmers or former soybean farmers that have fallen on hard times. Of course, the domestic tobacco market is all but dried up. These are also generally communities that are economically distressed. Now, they may not be urban communities, but they are just as much economically distressed. And to your point, Delegate Moorfield, Southwest Virginia and Southside Virginia also had a thriving textile industry, a coal industry, and those industries have fallen out of favor as well. So a number of folks got involved with the hemp industry after the passage of the 2018 Farm Bill, looking for a way to turn a dollar. Many of whom got involved with the hemp industry with an eye towards adult use cannabis. I don't have a degree in economics, but cannabis, high THC cannabis, often goes for 10 to 20 times the cost of industrial hemp. So it's the same plant, but for the THC concentration. So these hemp farmers do have the expertise and the experience with the cannabis sativa plant and the infrastructure required to process that plant into a consumable product.
Senator Evan.
Yeah, Mr. Bishop, do you know of the hemp growers that you know? Do you know any that would meet some of the social equity components goals in the initial legislation?
The hemp growers, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Bishop. We're kind of we kind of got around to some of the things that I wanted to discuss. Are there any other issues? Because I want to ask if there's an appetite to present some options to Mr. May, put him to work so he can earn his check over these couple of hours. Is there anything else comment prior to that? Because I understand the comments that Senator McPike made, and I know that when Mr. Moorfield takes over in January, there'll be some different conversations on the House side now, but I do want to give Mr. May some direction regarding some possible legislation about options and what that legislation might look like regarding a few dates, not necessarily just July 1, 2022, but maybe January 1, 2023, July 2023, and look at those dates as options, especially in light of Senator McPike's comments about making sure that we follow the other steps that kind of they work in hand with what we want to do around education and advocacy for young people as well as for adults to know what's going on with this thing. So I'd like to hear any comments or if there's an appetite for the committee. That would be the only vote that I'd like to have, if we can entertain that, about giving Mr. May some direction in that regard. And then if we get to that point in January where Mr. Moorfield wants to introduce some legislation, he'll have some options. Is there a thought along that line, gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I think your idea is an excellent idea to provide some options and variability of time of the committee's consideration. I think there's some parameters that would still need to be worked out in terms of direction, in terms of obviously the fees, social equity, other opportunities, how that aligns with timing, because I think there's been a lot of discussion to make sure that there's actually money available. And timing to market, I think, is one of those things that remains of concern. I think there's some good opportunities to provide a safe product with those that are in the market now and figure out the right timing of transition to your suggestion. I'm not sure whether July 1 we can get everything in timed appropriately, but possibly January with the elements in place and some other complexities that we need to take a look at. The other question, Mr. Chairman, I would have of council is, are there any limits on the size of agricultural grow for medical providers right now? In other words, is there 40 acres? If there's early access to market and market grow, is it unlimited per one license, or are there any parameters around that? Because I know part of the committee's deliberation and concern is sort of, with the access to early market, do they now have sort of the access to grow more and do early expansion and sort of lock up market? And I know that's been an ongoing discussion. And so, council, I don't know if you have a response to that. Is there any limitations? Because I know that'll come up in the future.
Mr. Chair, Senator McPike, I'm not aware of any limits on them. I'll defer if Mr. McCauley has any information on that. I do not specialize in that medical piece, but I will be learning more about that soon. I see.
Mr. McCauley, you have some information?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, there isn't any canopy limit, but in our concept, we would have no more than the 6 dispensing facilities that we're allowed under the medical rules. So, getting back to the JLARC report, that would be 7% of the projected retail outlets. So we don't think that would be, by any stretch, give us market power or anything like that. So.
Can I actually follow up? So that 7% is just the 7% of the license. It's not of square footage for sales, correct?
No, that's just based on what JLARC projected the number of retail cannabis stores would be. I think they said it was 400.
Right.
And so it's just there would be 30 of those 400.
Right, but you're not limited in square footage, correct?
No.
So that means you could have
but it could be. I mean,
you could have a large footprint, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And Senator McPike and I have talked about canopy, limitations. There is an issue too of, take for instance the micro businesses, where they're going to get product, and because it takes a while, as you know, I think all of you toured facilities. It takes a while to grow and process. So you don't, I don't think you want to put artificial constraints on the cultivation facilities, because then you have all these businesses starting up and they won't have any product.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. McCauley before he leaves?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I think that's, as a follow-up, one of the questions in terms of what is an equivalent grow license, for instance. is it 100,000 hectares of land or indoor, or what is the equivalent? Because I think the concern is ultimately like folks buying out or having a single license from a big corporation that becomes the major producer. I don't know what the answers are. I know there's lots of different models out there. But that was certainly something that was contemplated and wrestled with during our normal session. And I think that begs the question, if we allow early access, is the competitive advantage on the product production side? I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I think it's something that others have asked the question during committees and subcommittees and frankly during the full bill debates, at least in the Senate. And something as we look at ways to accelerate, I think we need to be cognizant of not getting caught up without at least contemplated what the right answers are. And I'm not sure that if there is a perfect answer, but it would, if there's anybody here that also might have some thoughts, I'm open to that as well.
Okay. Come on up, ma'am. State your name.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nigas Tabebi, I serve as Vice President of Public Policy for Columbia Care. In response to your question about canopy sizes, there is no current canopy cap on the medical operators, but we all are required to, because of the way the medical law was originally written, to have everything in our first site vertically integrated. So our regulator knows exactly how much square footage we have and what we can have within the facilities we currently have and have online. And so that's with only 4 processors currently active. That's very measurable and very monitorable for any future regulator. If I can answer one other point that was raised earlier as well, I also was appointed to serve on the Health Policy Advisory Council, and in our first meeting 2 weeks ago, we were briefed by the Virginia Foundation for Healthy Youth. The $1 million that you all already allocated to them is already being put into practice, and they're already developing their plan for public education. So when we talk about expediting the sales, I think there's that work is already in motion because you all already made that implemented and started, but also one of the best ways to get consumer education out there is to require regulated retailers to provide that education to consumers. And so the sooner consumers come into a place that is mandated and has state-approved materials to provide to help educate adults, the sooner we can make sure that everybody is getting educated. And those are not necessarily conversations that are happening in some of the existing cannabis transactions in the state right now. Thank you.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
You may need to come back.
You don't.
Follow up. So you just think you can just drop the mic and leave? No.
No, I was not on the agenda.
I'm the chair for 10 more minutes.
You are correct, sir.
Senator McPike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of the other concerns, of course, is the impact of price on medical for the existing, right? And so you have a limited canopy now. What happens to the price when adult use is then allowable to medical? And so you have sort of the string is being pushed and pulled, right? And so if you have a limited capacity, like you said, under the same roof, I'm going to now flip and argue the other way. What is the right parameter when you're going to have price wars, right? Which theoretically, based on supply and demand, the price of the existing medical clients is going to go up, which also would cause me concern, right? You have existing customers that have a need.
Historically, when medical operators are allowed to co-locate adult use, in every single state, medical prices have gone down. And it is because right now we know exactly how many patients we can serve. Unlike every other part of the cannabis industry, whether it's CBD retail or Delta 8, we can only dispense our products to about 40,000 people in the entire Commonwealth of Virginia right now. We are continuing to see that patient count tick up, but that ability to serve both populations, I think we will be able to provide in the first few years of early adult use sales, because what tends to happen is we see more foot traffic, which helps us bring down the overall cost of individual products, because we are able to expand our customer base beyond, again, roughly 40,000 registered patients in the state.
Thank you. And I guess, Mr. Chairman, as we're giving direction to Mr. May, I think one of the issues is the ability to ramp up in the timeline. If we say that the medical providers or industrial providers are available to provide by July 1, I think you're going to have that economic squeeze on the prices. I think they're already gauged to it, and I think a ramp up to January actually provides for a little bit more capital investment, grow time, so there aren't pressures on the medical side. That's my concern.
I think that's perhaps,
happy to hear from other people, but I just see this push and pull happening. I'm not sure how it's going to be resolved.
I think that based off of what we've seen and the foot traffic we're seeing, one, I believe there are also already requirements that we have to prioritize patient supply. And that's been implemented in lots of states with great success. You can look at any menu for an Illinois medical and adult use dispensary, and you'll see the patient side has more affordable and a more diverse array of products than what you'll see on the adult use side, because patients have to be prioritized. And so I don't think, again, historically, we've never seen medical prices increase because we were able to serve more customers, especially at a stage like this where we have very low patient count and we're nowhere near having fully registered patients. And so, especially also with the expansion of medical, many of the operators are already expanding our gardens because we were preparing for this uptick in patient registrations and being able to meet the anticipated increase in patient demand as well. So we are preparing for that, and the sooner we have clarity and guidance on what exactly this transition to adult use is going to look like, we will do everything in our powers to meet that demand and ensure a smooth transition.
Any other questions before she drops the mic? Okay. Thank
Properly
you.
dismissed now?
Thank you. Yes. No, you're not dismissed. But you can go sit down. Thank you. I guess I just want to give Mr. May some directions so we can properly give him his orders, so his parameters. So, Mr. May, you've heard some of the comments from Mr. McPike, and you've heard some of the comments from the public and others, and Mr. Moorfield and Senator Eben, Delegate Moorfield and Senator Eben. Do you have kind of a general idea? And we can literally follow up, because what I'd like to do is bring this particular motion, if we direct Mr. May to draft something to the full committee, Senator Evans is the chair, bring it to him so then we can pass something at that full committee meeting. So that my initial thing is to maybe recommend that we direct our liaison legal staff to draft some options for us to present to the full committee. If I could hear a motion with that, and then we can talk offline about those specific parameters with Mr. May if he has questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Absolutely.
Before we move forward, I think we should just state, in terms of a date, we heard some discussion about the possibility of July 1st, 2022. We also heard the possibility of January 1st, 2023, which allows a little bit more room. So I think that we should...
My goal was to give him all of those dates.
Okay. And
so he can...
And then we can finalize.
Okay. And then he can play with all of them. Then when we get the legislation, we go before the full committee and talk about it. Based on the legislation that he's drafted with those three options of July 1, January, and July 2023.
Okay, and if I might ask...
And if not, we just stick with January 1, 2024. Like Mr. Moorfield wants. I'm sorry. Like what the legislation is intended to have right now.
Well, the other piece I just want to say that's related to the date is who the regulator is. If we have the Cannabis Control Authority as the regulator, I don't think that would be realistic for this July, but maybe for January it would. I don't know if there's others on the committee who have any thoughts on that.
Senator, I think Mr. May probably is aware that if he moved that date up early, there's no way the Cannabis Control Authority would be the licensing agency.
Right.
It'd probably have to be the Board of Pharmacy. And so he'd write legislation that contemplates the regulatory agency and the licensing agency being the pharmacy until CCA is up right now for the early starts. I don't know any other way that he could do it. That's the only option that he has.
Okay.
He's a very, very smart attorney. Highly paid, too. Any other comments from the committee? I'd just like to entertain a motion, Mr. McPike, Senator McPike, if you have something.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
So the motion that I have that we're about to vote on is to direct our attorney to draft three options: July 1, 2022, January 1, 2023, and July 1, 2023 options for moving the date up for adult use sales. And based on whatever regulatory construct, taking into account some of the social equity goals that we already have in the current legislation, and then present something to us so we can have a conversation with the full committee when Senator Evans, our chair, calls that next meeting prior to January. All in favor?
Well, let me ask another question, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Discussion.
Yeah, I think it's important, because you mentioned social equity, if we're to go ahead and have early sales, that we could require the medical or the hemp manufacturers to have an incubation program for micro businesses, social equity candidates. We wouldn't have to require that to be a social equity applicant that you would have been a incubated business, but I think it would be good to require that as part of it in what we develop, if that makes sense.
Mr. May, you hear your instructions.
Mr. Chair, I am not entirely clear on that last piece.
That we require that in order to have early sales, that you would be a incubator of micro businesses, potential micro businesses in the cannabis field, but that you would not, if you wanted to later become a micro business, you wouldn't have to have been incubated, but that we would have those 5 or 6 medical purveyors or however many hemp ones incubate businesses that could potentially be micro cannabis businesses. And I can provide you with some more detail. I have some other things I can get with you after the meeting with detail on that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Senator Evans, yeah, I think that's something that I can work up. I don't think there would be anything that would prohibit a micro business who participated in the incubation program from, anyone who didn't participate from later being classified as a micro businesses for purposes of, for instance, vertical integration. But we could draft up something to give that opportunity for 5 or 6 businesses per pharmaceutical processor.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Without ado, I'll let you guys drive back to Northern Virginia traffic. This meeting is adjourned.
Wants to vote?
Oh, sorry, got to vote. All in favor? Call the roll. Oh, I'm sorry, public comment. But we're going to vote on this. We're going to call the roll, then we're going to do public comment. Madam Clerk, I told y'all this is my first committee chair.
Senator McPike.
Aye.
Delegate Adams, Delegate Krizak, Delegate Moorfield.
Abstention.
Senator Eben.
Aye.
Delegate Scott.
Aye.
3 ayes, 0 noes, 1 abstention.
Public comment. Madam Clerk, would you are the people already signed up, or we want to come in order? How want to do that?
No.
Okay, so come up to the mic. We're limited to 2 minutes, Madam Clerk. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, my name is Howard Lee Flinner. I'm from Chesapeake, Virginia. I'm here because of micro-licensing and other ways that jobs and things that people can get with this new institution of cannabis production. New Jersey, if you, Cannabis Business Times, I'm not affiliated with them, but Cannabis Business Times, they have quite a bit of articles through the federal, it's nationwide. And they have some great ideas for micro businesses. And one that I seen that was just really interesting was that they would allow 1,000 plants per month to be harvested. That's 12,000 pounds a year. And literally that could be between $19 and $38 million a year. So, and there's so many other things that we can open up to other people that want to start a business. They don't have to grow. I mean, there's so many other things that can be instituted for especially for social equity. It's very important to myself as well. That's really all I had. There's another website I'd like for you guys to be familiar with, maybe is leafwire.com. I've also been Mr. Knobloch of the Small Business Administration. Of course, they can't do anything because it's federally funded, but they do have the Small Business Development Center that I have communicated with, and they're interested in that, and that's exactly what we need. We start a business, and we still need to be able to make it work. This is something that we can't just jump into. As far as the big guys in here doing the medical, more power to them. They're in all kinds of states. It's just a game of who gets the ball. And that's really all I have to say. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming up. I'm at Hampton Roads too, so safe travels on 64 back.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Who's up? Thank you. Can you state your name?
Yes, sir. My name's Lennis Worth, and I'm the founder of Virginians Against Drug Violence. We've been coming in here and talking to you guys for a lot of years. So anyway, right now, I have one thing I want to say emphatically, and that is there are a lot of cannabis dealers in the state of Virginia that do not sell hard drugs, period, end of story. That's an urban myth or something, that they all sell drugs. Now, there are a lot of police departments that have rightly prioritized looking for the people who are selling all kinds of stuff, but and that might show up in police records like that, but there are a lot of cannabis dealers that only sell cannabis. They're decent people. And now they're branded criminals, and I think they should be brought in from the cold. And I think that's what this whole thing is all about, right? This is about getting people out of the criminal world and into a legal world. And I think that's wonderful. So let's do it. So right now, as I'm hearing it, you're asking the existing cannabis pharmaceutical companies to kick in $1 million to the equity fund or whatever it gets spent on, but $1 million, and then to incubate 5 or 6 micro applicants. Is there anything else? So I'm asking a question at this point. Is there anything else that you're asking them to do? Because I need to know. Or is that it at this point, or is that open for further discussion?
That's absolutely open for further discussion. If you go back and look at the legislation, it's very specific about social equity. That's just what we're talking about today.
Right.
So it's going to be more conversation, and I don't necessarily want to have a new committee hearing on that one issue.
Yeah.
But I expect that you'll see some things, and as we move forward, especially if we move to an earlier date, there will be some strict requirements around making sure documented requirements, hopefully, that we can all agree on to make sure we keep social equity in the picture. Thank you.
So stay tuned, but that's all that you've got right now, is those two things, the $1 million and the incubation.
That's assuming if we make any changes. What we have right now, that's already passed, that's legislation, already includes social equity legislation to involve everybody, especially those who have already been justice involved in the past.
Exactly, as it should be. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, commission members. I just wanted to add to some of the other remarks that I made before to speak to this question of incubation and ensuring that we have a thriving Virginia cannabis marketplace. At Columbia Care, we have already launched programs to support local Virginia businesses, and last weekend I actually had the first weekend of a boot camp that we helped develop with the Virginia Minority Cannabis Coalition. That's one piece of our plan to help ensure that local Virginia entrepreneurs, everyone from veterans to folks who've been justice involved, have the tools and resources to enter this cannabis market. We also have a network of small and minority-owned and veteran-owned businesses that's being developed for our supplier diversity. This is everything from HVAC companies to, pipe brands and anything else that we can use to help ensure that we have local Virginia businesses on our shelves, and then we're supporting the broader economy. And I raise that in addition to our third partner who does Know Your Rights education and is ensuring folks understand the bounds of the law and what resources are available to them and how to be responsible consumers, and also how to access what justice reforms have been implemented already. I raise that because I think as we look forward towards what types of requirements will be placed on pharmaceutical processors, I hope that we also leave some flexibility for the fact that work is already underway to support those priorities and to keep those, again, this thriving Virginia economy moving forward. One other point that I'd like to raise around some of the dynamics with hemp and pharmaceutical processors, which will be a delightful and lively conversation ahead for all of us, I'm sure. But one thing that's important to note about adult use cannabis that is different from hemp is that we are federally illegal. And as a result, in particular when it comes to 280E taxation, the effective tax rate on a cannabis company is upwards of 70% because you are taxed basically on everything except for the cost of goods sold. And so when we think about the economic opportunities or relief that might be provided through adult use, I think we also need to be judicious in understanding that there are still a lot of obstacles to sustainable business enterprises, and we're seeing that in a lot of mature markets. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
I'm John Shenholzer. I'm the founder of the Virginia Cannabis Education Association. How I got involved with this topic is I run the McShin Foundation, a recovery community organization, and I had a fella come through that recovered from alcoholism, and he went on to explain to me how the cannabis industry is evolving around America, and he had extensive experiences in Colorado, Maine, and California, and he made the point to me that decisions are being made in Virginia, and you're really not getting fully educated on all the different aspects of what you've been working through, and a lot of good work has been done. And then we also have these other fellows coming in strung out on opiates that cannabis consumption can alleviate and keep them off of other more harmful drugs. So here I am thinking these kids, they can get Medicaid can pay for methadone and Suboxone indefinitely, a more dangerous substance than cannabis consumption. So I'm thinking, how can we get these kids cannabis legally for the price they can afford, because the federal government will never allow for Medicaid to fund it, but how can I get these guys that have so much experience with the development of the cannabis industry in front of you guys so they can fully educate you on things? And just in this meeting alone, I've heard the conversation, and I was in Colorado last week, and I heard a discussion out there how Oklahoma, it's wild, wild west out there growing cannabis. Very little restrictions. Anybody can grow all they want, sell it for as cheap as they want. People from Colorado are going over to Oklahoma and buying truckloads of this stuff. So it undercuts the value of the cannabis market in Colorado. So when I hear illegal and black market, I want to keep that in perspective. You know, that woman's right. Most cannabis sellers, they stay away from all other drugs. So that is sort of a knee-jerk hype stuff over there. But as we move forward, I spoke to Mr. Moorfield earlier, and I'm systematically going to come in, everybody on the committee, and let's get some additional education on this stuff. A lot of farmers, a lot of mom and pop people, a lot of hemp growers. I just found out the other day that cows love hemp, you know? I didn't know that. I found out recently that cannabinoids are naturally reoccurring in the brain, and the body needs it. And you can actually get it through beef, grain-fed cows that eat hemp instead of the other dangerous particles you get in meat. So there's just so much education. I'm going to bring to you folks a tremendous amount of education in a very short period of time. So please accept my phone call and my visits from my educators.
Thank you very much. And just, you can bring that steak. That hemp
I might bring you a
Mr. Chairman, I think you got Delegate Moorfield's attention there. He sort of propped up when that statement was potential agricultural opportunities for his district there. You see that?
Believe me, he already knows. He did abstain for a reason. Any other public comment? All right, well, now I guess we can adjourn this meeting and you guys can get back in traffic. Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending.